Hey everybody's wardrobe change and I'm back again. Thought I'd make a second video, and this is Bea of Bea Sides fame made a video yesterday that was she asked when your parents stopped buying or collecting records or music, and I thought that was kind of an interesting subject. It made me think of my parents, so don't know how interesting this will be to anyone else, but kind of got my interest up because, well, the short answer to that is I have no idea. I don't, was trying to think, and I don't remember my parents ever, you know, going to the record store buying a record. So, uh, but they did have records, and I remember being a little kid. Got most of my music, Beatle influence and so forth, from my older brothers, and I've told that story a bunch of times. You know, when I played Magical Mystery Tour that one day in '73, and sort of paid attention to it for the first time. But I do remember being a little bitty kid, and I had records. I had a little record player, like, just with all my other toys. And I do remember my dad bought me a copy of Snoopy versus the Red Baron, the Royal Guardsman album, because I really liked Snoopy and Peanuts when I was a kid. So that was kind of fun. And I had some of the kids records, the Disney things, and I don't know if y'all remember this, but the used to be like a storybook, like Jack and the Beanstalk, or the Three Bears, those type things that would have a book, but then it would come with two 45 records, and it would be some lady reading the story, and it'd make a little beep sound when you were supposed to turn the page of the book. So I remember listening to those when I was a little bitty kid, even before I was, knew how to read. And so I had stuff like that, and I remember playing with that, and I had one of those little record players, and I'd listen to that stuff sometimes, but most of the time I would, turn it from 16 to 33 to 45 to 78, let it speed up and slow down. Which probably wasn't any good for the records, but it was fun to do when you were a kid. And then my parents or my family or whoever had one of those big stereo cabinet systems where you raise the top and there's the record player and all that way back then. So I remember my brother's records being around and kind of flipping through them here and there when I was a little kid before I really played them or listened to them, when I was a little older, when I was 9 or so. And I remember my parents having records, and they'd be kind of by that stereo system, and then there were some others in a closet in the den back there, and I remember kind of looking through those some. Most of them they probably bought before I came along, I guess. But I remember, and they were both born in 1925, my mom and my dad, so they were that pre-rock and roll age. And my dad never liked rock and roll at all, just thought it was a bunch of noise. And he didn't care that my brothers and me listened to it or anything like that, but he would, kid us around about it sometimes, and the closest he ever got was he said, yesterday at least kind of sounds like real music, and he liked a couple of CCR songs, but he was, because time rock and roll came along, he was close to 30, so, and my mom did like some of it, but not, like go out and buy the record like it, but she liked Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Simon and Garfunkel. I remember she liked that a lot. She liked London Town by Paul McCartney. Oddly enough, she liked The Wall by Pink Floyd. Not like she would come home and she'd be sitting there playing it, but when I would had it and would be playing it, she kind of liked it and some things like that. She liked Neil Diamond a lot, but they really their music taste was way before all that. So, like I said, I do remember sort of looking through their records from time to time, and they had not a ton of stuff, probably 20, 30 records. And you're talking, Sinatra, Dean Martin. I think there was some Bing Crosby in there. There was some, I don't know, show tunes or soundtrack things for like South Pacific and Camelot, 42nd Street. I remember there being a box set of 3 or 4 records that was like Arthur Fielder and the Boston Pops, something like that. There was some big band music, Tommy Dorsey and those guys, because my dad really liked that stuff, which, he would have been in high school and teenage years in the 40s, I guess, so that would have been their music. You know, my mom, I remember her saying that she born and raised in Chicago and came to Texas later. My dad was born in Fort Worth, Texas, and grew up here. She saw Sinatra and all those guys live in concert back when they were, you know, new and the big thing. As I thought it was kind of funny because my mom liked country music somewhat. My dad always thought that was funny because he grew up in Texas and he didn't like it. And my mom grew up in Chicago. When she came here, you know, she was telling him when they met and all that she liked it. And he, you know, was like that old cornball stuff. But he kind of came to like some of it later in life, I think. But anyway, so they had that sort of stuff, and they had well, they had Johnny Cash live at Folsom Prison, so that was, I think, 68 or so albums, so they must have bought that after I was born, but most of those records of theirs were from the 50s or so, and there were two things that really stuck out that I always thought were kind of funny. I wish I still had all those records, but they're long gone. I'd like to have them just for sentimental value, if nothing else, and the Sinatra stuff, you know, I mean, I thought that was stuff was cornball was all get out back when I was a kid, but I kind of like some of it now. And I kind of did in a way liked it back then because I remember them listening to stuff like that on the radio. And so even though I was, you know, rock and roll kid and all, it kind of, and thought that stuff was corny, I still kind of liked it in a way. Not that I would play it, but, you know. But two records that were in there that stick out to me because I thought it was pretty funny. One of them was they had a Ricky Ricardo album. Well, actually a Desi Arnaz album because, you know, I mean, besides being Ricky on I Love Lucy, he was also a singer and a musician, made records and all that. And it was, I don't remember what, but it had him with the big old conga drum, and like he was singing Babalu or something. And I thought that was pretty funny because, you know, the I Love Lucy was on before I was born, but and back in the 50s or whatever, but the reruns were already going by the time I was a little kid. So that was kind of cool. And then they had I can still remember it had a white cover and it had like a white up here, and then it had these little circles that were sort of a light gray. And it was, remember Sanger sewing machines? Well, they had, I guess my mom at some point got a sewing machine, and like nowadays if you buy stuff you get a like a blender or an appliance or something. A lot of times they'll come with a little DVD that, you know, kind of how to use the thing, instructions. Well, I guess back then they did that on record albums. So it was a Sanger sewing machine that said Sanger in red letters across the top of the white border. And, you know, I just thought that was kind of a record about a sewing machine. And it had I only had one track on side one, which was the instructions, and the back side had grooves, but they were grooves and then blank spaces, so it was kind of checkerboarded through the record, and there was nothing on it. But I remember putting that on the record player and playing it, and it was like, you know, which was terrible for the record needle, but I was 4 or 5, so, you know. And, you know, I played the record a couple of times, not all the way through, but it was like, you know, congratulations on the purchase of your Singer sewing machine, model number 5238. Before we get started, let's make sure all the, you know, and it's just one of those movie voice guys. So that was kind of, I thought that was kind of goofy and weird. But, you know, for all that, I don't remember them ever really playing the records, though. We had the stereo, and they had their records. I'm sure they did at some point back there. Maybe a few times when there was, you know, people over at the house for party thing or Christmas or holiday stuff. You know, some records went on the stereo and all. But I really can't remember many or any instances of them taking out a record and putting it on the record player and sitting back and listening to it. I do remember my brothers doing that, and my cousin, she lived right around the corner. She was my brother's age, and, you know, some of their friends across the street, I can remember them hanging out playing records. But, you know, they had them, so they must have bought them and liked them, played them at some point, I would assume. They did listen to the radio all the time. And I thought that was pretty cool because my dad used to listen to, I called it dad music stations, the kind that aren't really around anymore, the kind that play like big band music and Crosby and Sinatra and Dean Martin and Rat Pack stuff, you know, King of the Road and songs like that. and I thought that was kind of cool even when I was a little kid, even though I thought the music was kind of corny and goofy at the time. But you know, it's kind of sad because a buddy of mine, and we were talking about that somewhere way back there, and his dad listened to stuff like that too, and just how radio stations like that don't really exist anymore, and they really haven't since probably like the early to mid 70s, because the people, the age group of that is just got too old. And I guess there's stuff like that around now because you got all these internet radio stations and whatnot. You can find pretty much anything. But so I remember him listening to that, and I remember my mom listening to stuff like that. But she also listened to some country stuff, and she listened to KVIL, which was a god awful station. Used to be, it's still around in Fort Worth and Dallas, but it played sort of that kind of I don't know, minivan mom music back before there was such a term as minivan mom. Just sort of the, I don't know, Barbara Streisand and Muskrat Love and Barry Manilow, you know, stuff like that. Neil Diamond. But then again, she did like the older Sinatra and stuff. So I don't know. And they never, to my knowledge, collected records the way I do. And I don't know that they ever were like trying to build up the complete Sinatra collection or anything, but pretty much everybody likes music and has some records. So I mean, I think they were kind of in that category. Why they stopped buying records or listening to them is anybody's guess. I guess, like like you said, that sometimes people, you know, get married, have kids, get a job, kind of grow up, and just sort of grow out of it, and then just they're okay with whatever's on the radio. And so, you know, and it's funny too because, like I said, I remember my brothers having records, and a lot of their records that they left behind at home when they went off to college and moved out of the house and stuff. Because, like I said, they're quite a bit older, 9 and 13 years older than me, so they were gone by the time I was, I think it was 6, 7, or whatever. And so I kind of confiscated a lot of their records. I still have some of them actually, but I do remember one brother, and he's still, you know, going over to his apartment and stuff. And then later when he was married, he had a pretty nice stereo, and he had some records, and he kind of rock and roll stuff because he was of that age that he would have been, you know, like 9 or 10 when the Beatles came out. So I mean, some of that stuff, and he kind of got into Elvis retroactively. I don't think he was really big into him at first because he was too young. When he first came out, he would have been, you know, 3 or 4 or whatever, and or even younger, really, that one. So, but he still has some records, I think, not to the degree that I collect and buy records, but and he kind of likes the old rock and roll stuff and some country stuff. And my other brother, my oldest brother, he really doesn't that I know of. He might have some of his older records, and I know that he's got a few CDs in his car, mainly just older, some Beatles and Rolling Stones and Doors and stuff. But he's pretty content just to listen to the boring commercial radio here in Fort Worth, Texas, which I've got XM, and I haven't listened to regular radio in years because I don't know what it's like where you live, but here it's just really bad. Has been for decades. But so yeah, I mean, I know sometimes I'll be riding around in the car with him or something, and he'll have the classic rock station that plays like the same 20 songs, just, you know, over and over and over. You can sit there and listen to it for a couple hours, and you're going to hear Stairway to Heaven, Back in Black, and Comfortably Numb probably 5 times each. So he doesn't seem to mind that. Drives me crazy. But so why he stopped buying records and stuff after he, you know, in his early 20s or whatever, I don't really know. But yeah, so I just thought that's probably boring for everyone, but that was just kind of interesting when you brought that up, B, because it just made me think that I do remember my parents had records. I remember looking through them some when I was a little kid and stuff, but I really don't remember them. You know, I mean, well, they did have, because this would have been, you know, in the 70s and stuff, and they had cars, so I mean, they did have, you know, 8-track tapes in the cars, and I remember them having a few things like, oh, I don't know, Neil Diamond and just sort of old people music, you know, and I don't know, just stuff your dad that was, you know, 40 by then would be listening to. And they didn't have a ton of them, though. But yeah, I don't really remember them playing a lot of records around the house when I was a kid, and I don't remember them going to the record store and buying stuff other than when I got crazy over records and I was still a little kid with no money. They would buy me some records every once in a while. But I don't know. It was good to think about them back then, though, and the music they used to listen to, and really do wish I would have kept hold of their records and still had those things to look through. But it's a good topic, and I don't know. I don't know why some people lose interest in buying new records and or collecting records at some point in their life, and other people keep going with it. Uh, Maybe it's just some of us never really grow up. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it, B.